Now, I want to move on to the singer, the songwriter, the global feminist activist, Annie Lennox, OBE. Annie has been part of the musical landscape for 5 decades, from her days in the Tourists, the Eurythmics, her highly successful solo career. Her hits, for many, have been the soundtrack of their lives. 8 Brit Awards, including Best Female, British Female Artist, a record 6 times, 4 Grammys, Golden Globe, an Academy Award, the first woman to become a Fellow of the British Academy of Songwriters, Composers and Authors, now the Ivors Academy, the first female Chancellor of Glasgow Caledonian University, an OBE for tireless charity campaigns and championing of humanitarian causes, including women's rights through her organisation, The Circle, and now, at the age of 70, brings us this beautiful visual memoir of her life and career, Annie Lennox, Retrospective. Welcome.
Hey, here I am on Women's Hour. I'm exhausted by that list, actually.
I mean, it's such a beautiful book, but going through it, you do realise you have lived a life.
I certainly have. It's weird. I mean, it's just very strange.
And why now this book?
It's time. It's time. Actually, when I think back, and you've just read out that list, it was relentless. You know, my life has been a little bit relentless. It's been one thing after another, always doing something, and with very few breaks. And there was a time, maybe a decade or so, maybe 15 years ago, that quite a few publishers were approaching me and saying, we'd love to make a book with you. And I was thinking, I'd love to do that. But there were always other things to do. Then we had COVID pandemic. And maybe at that point in time, I started reflecting and taking stock of everything that you've just said that I've done, and that's only a tiny section of it, really.
I know.
You know, and it is a life fully lived. I only wish my parents were still alive to see it. You know, have to know what it was.
And your parents really are where you start this book. In fact, the first picture is one of this bonny baby with an intent gaze, staring out at us. And perhaps you could tell us a little of what your childhood in Aberdeen was like. Mm-hmm. You were an only child.
Mm-hmm. I was an only child, brought up in a working class environment. My father worked in the shipyards, my grandfather before him. My mother came from the countryside. My father obviously was from the town. And so that already made a slight schism. And life is so interesting that you have to fit in somewhere with some collective culture. And I realised that there were sort of different cultures around me by the sound of their voices and their dialect. So there's a country dialect, there's a town dialect. And then when I was 4.5, I went to a school. I was given the opportunity to go to a school where they spoke like Miss Jean Brodie.
I love that film.
And so I think as a result of that, I never felt that I belonged anywhere, really. I was always observing. I was always looking out of windows, playing alone or with the kids, you know, in the surrounding area, but kind of moving from, you know, the country to the town to the school.
And we do see you, young Anne, as you were at the time, singing your heart out in one of the photographs. You went on to study flute and piano at the Royal Academy of Music, but that wasn't to be your destiny. Before the Eurythmics, there was the Tourists and the Catch. What was it like looking back at those photographs? I'm thinking like the burgeoning pop star. You're in a silver jumpsuit at your first record signing just down the road on Oxford Street.
That's right. There's a massive schism, really, because I tried to be a good girl, good young provincial girl, going down to London, 17 and a half, first time I'd ever taken a train journey on my own like that, arriving in King's Cross Station early in the morning with a little piece of paper that was guiding me to Camberwell, where there was going to be a student residential hall to stay in. And I shared a room with 2 other girls, strangers to me. It was all very strange. I mean, the first day I went to the academy, I realised that I didn't fit in there. And the excellence that they expected, I was kind of not really at that, coming from a provincial town, I was quite good at playing flute. It gave me my passport down to London with opportunity, perhaps. So I spent the next 3 years at the Academy just feeling like, what am I going to do? I was pretty lost at sea, actually. It took another couple of years. I mean, I managed to stay in London. I was doing part-time jobs. And I didn't, when I went back to Scotland, I always felt like I don't belong here either. I don't know what I'm going to do. When I met Dave, it was a hugely significant point for me.
Dave Stewart,
yes,
for those who aren't aware.
I should say Dave Stewart.
But very few probably
Dave
not aware.
Dave to be. But the two of us were searching. I mean, he had 2 carrier bags, plastic bags to his name. He had issues with substances, let's say, and I had a little harmonium in a bedsit room in Camden Town, and I was working as a waitress in vegetarian restaurants, Cranks vegetarian, and there was a little place up in Hampstead. That's where we met. And he recognised something about me. God, I played the songs I was trying to write. I was working as a waitress and saying, well, I'm not really a waitress, I'm actually a musician, which a lot of people do. I mean, they say, I'm actually an actor, I'm actually a musician, I'm actually a budding scriptwriter, whatever. And it was a struggle. 70s in London was a struggle.
But you were with the tourists. The Eurythmics, many people will know you as you had that meeting of the minds with Dave Stewart. And if I come back to Retrospective, the cover has that striking image that so many people will recognise, an androgynous look, the short cropped red hair, the men's suits. You didn't even use stylists at those times. Where did those looks come from? What was it that appealed to you? Because I remember seeing it. I think I was about 12 at the time, 12, 13. And I was like, I've never seen anything like this before, but I want a part of it.
Yeah. It's interesting. It was an evolution, because when I first came down to London, this is provincial girl, wearing second-hand clothes, and I was, I had sort of longish hair, and I wore little T-bar shoes, and I had a little edge, but it definitely grew stronger, and the punk movement came in, and that had a huge effect on all of us. And so things started to evolve. And I think that the way you wear your clothes says a great deal about you, particularly when you're a performer. When you're a performer, you're informing people about yourself, consciously or unconsciously. So it came to that point of eventually finding a persona that really fitted. And I think everybody has a male and female aspect to them. Obviously, we have the DNA, and we're kind of a variant of that in a way. But it's a big topic, gender. But this is way before people were talking about gender fluidity and all the various aspects of interpretations of gender. And we didn't. Gender fluid sounds really kind of. How could I say, like respectful. When you're called a gender bender, it tells you something about how people looked at that at the time. It actually had nothing to do with my sexuality. It was more about taking the male power for myself and reinterpreting it and saying, I am equal to my partner here. And we were a duo with a male and female DNA,
Yeah.
Dave and Annie. And I think these things were almost, when you're exploring and experimenting, things come along and they're new. That was new at that time. And is it 40 years ago, I think, that Sweet Dreams came out, something like that?
Yeah.
And after that, it evolved into other things, and it was all about performance and exploring, and tremendous times.
Another striking photo, kind of on this theme, is the cover of Savage. It's you, a woman dressed as a man, dressed as a woman, and it challenges and subverts the male gaze. You've said just recently that you had to fight not to be regarded as a piece of meat when you were younger, and you've talked about the hypersexualized look of female singers in the industry. Why do you think so little has changed in all that time. We've just said it's over 4 decades.
It's a struggle, isn't it? I mean, when I said I didn't want to be regarded as a piece of meat, it's hyperbolic, a piece of meat. But I think women, the male gaze in certain ways can reduce women to that. When they find who they are, they might be hypersexualized. That might be the place they land. Or they might be indifferent to the male gaze, which I think is probably a safer place to be in a funny sense. I mean, at that time, if I talk about my own sense of who I was and whether I had confidence or not, it's a mix. I don't think we're all or nothing. I think from my observations and from my inner sense of experience, I come to believe that we are anachronistic, that we can contain aspects of confidence and at the same time low self-esteem. So I've experienced a great deal of things, and it's a massive topic to talk about, and we've only got a short amount of time, and there's a lot to pack in there.
Men still running the music industry?
Women are definitely making huge headroads. There are a tremendous amount of women in the music industry now compared to 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, none, very few. If there were any women, they were usually personal assistants, so worked in PR, secretaries, but definitely not. They were not then in charge. So I think there has been definitely a huge amount of progress. But I have to say, the reason why I wear the Global Feminist T-shirt,
which Annie has on right now, black with white lettering of Global Feminist,
which has not been suppressed by the BBC, I have to say thank you very much. Because it's not that threatening. You see, in a funny way, wearing this ought to be a little bit threatening, but it isn't at the moment. There are lots of other things that have become more threatening. We'll go back to that again.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking, perhaps in other environs, maybe it would be threatening or not, but that's another conversation.
Correct.
But I don't want to let you go, Annie, in our time before speaking about your activism, which is reflected in the book. There's a photo of you sitting next to Nelson Mandela, for example, World AIDS Day in 2007. You formed the Sing campaign to support organisations across Africa, and also found the Circle for 17 years now to support women and girls confronting gender-based violence, also economic inequality across the world. And just last week, you re-recorded and re-released your track Why, with new lyrics to raise awareness of the people of Gaza. What is the role of the artist in activism, according to Annie Lennox?
What a wonderful question. It's a choice. I mean, I don't think an artist necessarily has to be an activist. I think you have options. This is a calling for me. It's always been there. It's in my blood. It's in my family. I believe in justice. I believe in the foundation of conscience, and raising. Using your platform to raise awareness. The world is full of horrific injustice. We're not going to really ever make poverty history, but we can damn well try. We can damn well try to make people aware of the global injustices that have been going on for centuries. And so because of my trips to various projects where I've seen women in the most vulnerable situations, giving birth outside with no anaesthetic, for example, we don't have to look very far, and we see that pregnant women in war situations, in conflict zones, children in conflict zones. The whole picture of the so-called developing world that isn't Western is horrendous. When people are exposed to becoming refugees in their millions, people are exposed to poverty. Women are exposed to poverty, to violence. 1 in 3 women around the world experiencing sexual or domestic violence in their lifetime. 1 in 3. I think even if people understand that one quote, if you think about it for a little bit, it can create the difference. The change has to be, first of all, in the mind, in the values of the mind. If men don't understand what women are going through, they will simply become defensive and aggressive, and the chauvinism and misogyny will continue. So it's really up to women to demand the change, but also to educate boys and men, to bring them into the conversation right from the get-go. So, I mean, I've got such a lot to say.
I know you do. But, and I will just let people know, when we speak about activism, I mentioned some of the photographs in the book Retrospective. There's also a great one of you in Russia for Greenpeace at that point.
Around to the time of perestroika.
Yeah, and you've taken one of the hats of the Russian soldiers, just to give people an idea of this journey that we go on with Retrospective. Here's a toughie. If you could take just one image away from your book, what would it be?
The front cover really it says it all. The front cover is representative of the whole book, and the book itself is so it's so eclectic. And I'm just an eclectic person. I'm a magpie. I observe things. I'm highly sensitive, and I found out, and I mention it in the book, that I actually am a bit neurodivergent,
You were tested for ADHD. Which you passed with flying colours.
I did. I really am. And it's explained a great deal to me about how my mind works and how other people with ADHD, how their mind works. And it's not an easy thing to live with, but it also has fantastic superpower.
And can bring brilliance.
I think it does. I think it does bring brilliance. And I'm not saying I am brilliant, but thank you very much. I'll take that. But you know what, Nuala? For most of my life, I aspired to brilliance, let's say, not in the sense of and maybe an achievement, but through the medium of music, through the medium of language, lyrical presentation, all of that. All my curiosity has brought me to this place today in 2025, when I'm 70. It's so Retrospective kind of is only a little slice of that journey. It's almost like one of those gâteaux. It's a gâteau.
And I have just given them a little bit of the cream on top.
Slice of the cherry.
Annie Lennox, thank you so much for coming in. Come back to us again soon. Retrospective is out now.